G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for today's review of West Coast going down to Adelaide in a bit of a flat finish to a match that had a few really exciting performances from emerging players. For today's review, I'll be covering a quick overview of the loss, who our best and promising performers were, and then my key takeaways from the match and where I think we're headed. The game began really evenly, and West Coast came out of the blocks playing our best football. But over the course of the match, however, some of the little things began to get the better of us. And to Adelaide's credit, they really started playing better and better themselves as the game wore on. So I think it was a case of probably our best versus somewhere around the middle for them right early in the game. But more than anything, though, especially because I don't really mind Adelaide being the team that we lose to, it does take some of the sting out of it, unlike some other weeks. I just hope that we're not coming out of, say, with the beginning of another injury crisis on our hands. I mentioned last night in my video review of the Waffle Eagles that there were a handful of injuries that seem to have crept up on us in the last fortnight. I mean, with the known injuries that we had in the AFL side last week, yes, but also there were a couple of injuries. I think Cal Jamieson and Jack Petruccelli went down without any knowledge really of seeing it happen. And then late in the game today, we had another batch of players looking uncertain at the moment. Jake Waterman copped a really unpleasant angle just between like a rock and a hard place marking contest with his arm outstretched in the fourth quarter. And it probably looked to me like a dislocation would be the best case scenario. Sometimes dislocations don't come with, complications to ligaments if you're lucky. But by the time the final siren sounded, I did see both Tyrell Dewar and Tom Cole go down in play with what looked like really strong reactions to their ankles. Waterman's injury obviously stopped play, but each of the other guys going down looked like it could have been potentially also injuries, maybe serious, but time will tell on Tuesday night. And for me personally, we've just had such a long build up to where we are at right now in the season that it just feels like the last thing we need if our list starts to get clipped by too many injuries. But to our best players, for the second week in a row, my best player for West Coast had a really low possession count, which I guess you could interpret both positively and negatively. Tyler Brockman, that is, finished the match with 16 disposals and a goal, but his impact was the best I've seen from him. It's a really good sign that we have taken another step forward in solving our midfield potency issues. 10 of his disposals were contested, by the way, with 4 clearances, and aside from his 1 goal and 2 behinds, he also had 2 goal assists, which gives him a pretty big slice of the pie chart in our total score. That's really a pretty strong involvement in 3 of the 8 goals that we kicked. Like I mentioned, his 2 behinds did leave the potential for him to have kicked 3 out there on the field, which was also indicative of the side today, just with the wind at Adelaide Oval causing chaos with the shots on goal. And then speaking of leaving potential goals out there, my second best for the day, Jake Waterman, kicked 3 straight before he was forced to retire early in the fourth quarter with that shoulder injury. The output from Waterman is what we've really come to expect from him as a known quantity, and made a big difference on a day where the scoreboard was probably our biggest deficiency. And I'm not saying that we were good enough to win, but we did probably land a little further behind on the scoreboard than I think we deserved at the end of the day. I also thought Elijah Hewitt belonged right in the top end of our best players today. He probably started that first quarter as our best player and had a big hand in our, how close to the contest we were at that first siren, then slid a little bit back towards the middle of the pack over the next couple of quarters before finishing strongly again. One of the things I love seeing with Hewitt, and I've talked so much about this year across our midfield, is that even when he's not getting his hands on the ball, he just checks his opponents so closely in the contest. Just picture, I suppose, his direct opponent running with the ball almost in their possession, and the way Hewitt is basically just body to body at full tilt the whole time they do that, and then usually lands with a tackle. He doesn't let freedom of ball movement happen very easily in the opposition, and that's something we desperately need in our midfield. We have patched it in the last couple of weeks, but it's still a very important trait that we need across the midfield at the moment. He finished with 5 tackles to go with a pretty solid 19 disposals, but also had 19 pressure acts and 5 clearances as well by the end of the game. So a bit like Brockman, it's really exciting to see the solution to our midfield problems start to emerge, especially when it comes from the younger players. Fourth best, I definitely think that Tom Cole deserved a mention in our best players today. He showed great agility and decision making, finishing with, I think, 7 disposals in a pretty unforgiving role, which I think is very easy for people to lose sight of when you see the mistakes that those defenders make. I know Witherden copped it a lot when he was playing, and you can even see now Marrick's role. I digress, but it does show how lucky we were to have Shannon Hearn, because it's not an easy role coming out of the back line with the way the game's set up these days. But I've got to say, with Tom Cole, my highlight for the day was watching him crawl away with the ball between his knees like my toddler when she's not supposed to be doing something. The free had been paid to the Adelaide player, and he just did the most overtly innocent display of interfering with the return of the football that I've seen this year. So that did add a little bit of entertainment to the side when the game was still going all right. Other strong performances included Liam Baker, as always, doing what he does week in, week out. Jack Graham with the same. And then Sandy Brock, I think, elevating his output in the AFL again with the momentum that he's been building in that top 23 the last few weeks. So for those who are new subscribers to the channel, I have a bit of a phrase for senior players who are in form as basically just being a known quantity. So I try not to get too bogged down describing some of the same strengths that I see week in, week out, other than to say that they were in the best players once again. Just to give a bit of context to why, Waterman's performance and Jack Graham and Liam Baker kind of get glossed over. It is something that we've come to expect, and it's just all it's saying is that they were, again, in our best players. Sandy Brock, on the other hand, is becoming a really promising performer for us in key back, and he's turned out to be an absolute steal, coming to us through the SSP and filling a void that was left by Tom Barrass and Jeremy McGovern with Harry Edwards alongside him, probably for the first year that we've had the depth to do that. Up until that point, we found ourselves in really bad spaces whenever both our star key defenders were out. With 2023 in particular, I think coming to mind, where there was a patch where every key forward, every star key forward of the competition came along and kicked 10 goals on us whenever they came to play that depleted backline. Brock showed really good composure, timing, and athleticism all day. And I did hear the commentators mention that his direct opponents haven't kicked a goal on him in 3 weeks. So I'm not sure how to fact check that one, but I thought it was a pretty useful stat to hear about someone that I've been seeing improve week in, week out, and definitely has what it takes to be in our AFL squad in a spot that really we've been struggling with for a long time. Anyway, that brings me to my key takeaways. And first up, anybody in South Australia who argues that Adelaide Oval is a better stadium than our Optus Stadium here just needs to take a look at the impact that the wind had on the game today. Watching the ball in flight was a bit of a throwback to the 90s, where the term 5-goal breeze was a regular thing that you heard. The kicking on goal looked like nothing I've seen. Like half of the shots, they swung back and forward in flight like one of those UFO videos. And the quality of football from both sides was significantly affected by the wind, both in field passing and set shots. And you can see there's an open part of the stadium at one end of the ground that is definitely responsible for that, because there's a reason why you heard 5-goal breeze in the 90s and you don't hear it anymore. It's because the stadiums have actually done a much better job of encapsulating the space that the players play in. My second key takeaway is that our lack of possession is becoming a bit of an issue now. I know that our game plan is leaning away from high possession counts, and I do want to make it clear that this is not an issue with the coaching or our game style, but what I've been saying for a while is that we need to have an accumulating midfielder emerge in the side. It looked like Elijah Hewitt was going to be that guy for us early today. I think he had about 7 disposals in the first 10 minutes of the first quarter, so it's not impossible for players to achieve that possession count under the new game plan. But with only 2 players with over 20 possessions today, I think Duggan had 22 and Marrick had 20. Both of those guys are defenders. It is showing that it's becoming a bit of an issue. And I think it's an issue with our playing list rather than anything else. My third and final key takeaway, though, which is a bit of a positive note, just to counter that last observation, is that I can see our ball movement really beginning to emerge. Despite the loss and the low possession count, we had a really high number of passages today where you could see the ability to stop our ball movement was completely out of Adelaide's hands, which is what you want to be doing when we do become, a force of the AFL once again. It's slick. It does involve that overlap handball ball movement that every team uses, but it also looks like it involves a really impressive running pattern from everybody all at once in the side. And it's not quite the tsunami as well that I'm talking about, that the Giants, I'll put my finger on it in hopefully the next few weeks, but it is starting to emerge. And so hopefully that is something to get really excited about, especially if some of the injuries I saw today turn out to be better than they looked. And we've got that, I suppose, to look forward to in the coming weeks. For me personally, I'll be keeping a close eye on the injury report this Tuesday evening, and I'll hopefully see everybody again for next weekend's reviews, starting with the waffle again on Saturday. But anyway, until then, as always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll hopefully see you then.